Hey, it's Michael with Yoga for Drummers. And what I'd like to cover now are the psychological underpinnings of the yoga practice that, again, just like the philosophical considerations, differentiate it from just like mere calisthenics or exercise. But the first thing I'd like to talk about is this question of what is a regular practice? Oftentimes people want to know how much of this stuff do I have to do to get the benefit. So what I'd like to share with them is that any rhythm that you can find yourself in, any schedule that you can commit to is your practice. Ideally, you want to set up a win-win situation for yourself. So it's best to under-promise and over-deliver. So, well, I guess what I mean by that is that you would like to, if it's every other day for 15 minutes, or every 2 days for 15 minutes, or once a week for 15 minutes, keep that schedule, keep that commitment. And over time, the practice will grow itself. You're just going to want to do this. In a perfect world, doing something every day, or at least after practice, or if you're practicing on a regular basis, that's optimal. Much like time at the kit, it's the continuity of practice over time that yields the benefit. So 15 minutes a day will get you a lot further than an epic practice of an hour and a half or 2 hours once a week or every 10 days. So that said, let's talk about some of the concepts that underlie the practice. Okay, again, whereas it's cloaked in a physical practice, there's a lot of stuff happening on the inside that really make it a unique process. So I mentioned before that this who you are towards yourself as you practice is really what we're after. And there's some yogic principles that I'll share with you that frame that out. Much like if we buy a widget, we get the instruction manual, and oftentimes we put that off to the side and fumble with the widget until we get lost, and then we defer to the instructions again. In the yoga practice, before you even do the physical practice, there's some guidance on how you should approach the practice, kind of basically how you treat yourself. So the first concept is called ahimsa, or nonviolence to self, and nonviolence to self and others. And right away, the concept that we're used to, no pain, no gain, goes out the window. If you're feeling pain in the practice, the yoga is gone. Now that doesn't mean to not explore your edges, because if you don't explore your edges, you don't grow. So it's important to push the envelope, but there's a way to approach that edge and peek over it, okay? So we'll cover that a little bit when we get to the breath component. But again, it's going to be a responsible exploration when we do approach our limitations. Another idea is satya, or truthfulness. And the idea here is to practice authentically without apology. In fact, you should do everything that is unique to you authentically without apology. Okay, I mean, this is, again, the human experience. But what I mean here is that, much like drummers having preferences at the kit, we all have different shapes and sizes. Okay, we all have different physical abilities or physical histories. Our bone shapes are different, which structurally are going to dictate how open a joint might be able to become. And we want to start to feel into that structure and honor whatever it's capable of doing, on either side of the coin. We're not going to push it, but if there is room for growth, we're going to investigate it and progress along that path. Okay, so practicing authentically without apology. If you can't do something, that's okay. All right, in time. Again, it's a crawl, walk, run process. All right? The last piece that I want to introduce here is called asteya. And it means non-stealing for the most part, or non-wanting. I want that guy's practice, or I want that woman's practice, okay? I love what they're doing. This is more, I like to flip it around and call it abundance consciousness. That through this practice, we can create the energy that we need. And here's a really important part. And this is where it starts to really frame out how you can change the way your day goes. Oftentimes we come to the mat. I explained earlier about, taking in the stresses and the tensions of the day and this kind of funk, and then feeling pretty junked up when we get to the mat. Okay? And then we're going to use the practice to transform that energy into healing energy and high vibe to hand off to our milieu, our community. And what we can do with this practice is actually start to lift the veil of fatigue or torpor or sloth. Okay, so you might come to the practice as being heavy, but through a compassionate and mindful and equanimous investigation, you can find out whether or not fatigue or heaviness is true about you. But you're going to use the breath and the movement, and again, a balanced frame of mind to dispel that belief, okay, and to lift that veil. And oftentimes people report that they can have their strongest, most energetic practice if they just stick with it for about 15 minutes. And I can assure you that you will wind up on a radically different trajectory if you give yourself that 15 minutes. I mean, think about it. If you wake up and you're tired and you go off in your day, hey, I'm feeling this way, that's the energy you're going to draw into your day. But if you change that and you kind of use the breath and movement to rub these two sticks together to create the energy that you need to bring yourself into balance and harmony, you create that and then you head out as a very energetic, resonant being, and you're going to have a radically different day. And that's what we're talking about here. And again, it doesn't require an epic practice. Okay, it requires just the showing up and seeing what nature has in store for you. All right, so the next piece I want to talk about is, I think I mentioned it before, but flexibility doesn't guarantee happiness. Okay, a lot of times we associate flexibility and yoga, and oftentimes people will say, well, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga. And the practice isn't so much about that. I mean, if I get into a bad situation, I'm not going to put my leg behind my head. Okay? What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to chill out and pay attention to what's in front of me, and then I can take mindful action as opposed to blindly reacting to what's in front of me. Remember that yoga can decrease impulsivity and increase self-regulation. I mean, this has been found when treating trauma or working with yoga in a prison setting, these types of conditions. Okay, so it has that capacity to transform how the brain operates. Okay, so that said, what we're going to be looking at is the body's agenda and the ego agenda. Now, what I mean by ego agenda, I'll work backwards here, is that oftentimes people come to the yoga practice because they hear that it helps them feel better or they can gain this benefit. Some want a beach body, some want to be strong, some want flexibility. And all those things are cool because you are going to feel better. But the body might have a separate agenda. It might say, wow, they're creating some healing energy for me. I want to clean out my kidney. Or I want to fix a micro tear in a ligament in my left knee that they don't know about. And it's got its priority list, and that differs from what my conscious mind is really wanting. Now, what happens is that after it attends to some of those things, it might say, wow, okay, flexibility, hamstring length, okay, and it fits it into, its agenda, and all of a sudden that pops up. So it's important to note here that as you set out on this journey, the benefits might not quite be immediate because the yoga practice works from the inside out. Okay, it's going to be first things, most important things first, and over time it'll start to build out into something that's kind of tangible results. So one of the things that starts to pop up in that is that we're drawn into the yoga practice because we want to have something change. Okay, and a lot of times that we have either a body story or some aspect of ourselves that kind of defines us to ourselves. So it's almost like looking through a keyhole into a big room, and we have this limited view of who we are because we're just looking through this lens of what we would like to have changed. And the yoga practice provides an opportunity for us to kind of flip the headline and to see how much of us is intact and functioning properly. I mean, frankly, if you take a look at it or you take inventory, about 99.9+% is great. I mean, we have arms for hugging, we metabolize, we can breathe, our legs walk us around on the planet without even having to pay attention. Yet sometimes we get hung up on this one thing that we just keep seeing in ourselves. But if you flip the headline and you start to hold some gratitude and appreciation for all that is intact, that headline gets a lot smaller. Okay, and then your sense of body or your sense of self just changes radically. And in this way, your overall sense of well-being starts to rise. And that's priceless, okay? And that trumps flexibility any day. And again, the flexibility will come, so it's just about being patient with that and having gratitude again for everything that is functioning properly. So one aspect of the yoga practice is that more today doesn't necessarily guarantee more tomorrow. And I like to describe this or explain this looking at an economic graph, which might depict a straight line going up, okay, versus a mutual fund that actually trends over time. So it's up, it's down, it expands, it contracts, it might plateau. Okay, in the latter, this mutual fund scenario is a lot more like the yoga practice. There's going to be some days where you have high vibe and flexibility and all the postures come easily. And then there's going to be some other days where you're feeling a little heavier and maybe not so energized. I mean, that happens at the kit often. I might have a very open practice where things are really clicking, and the next day I get behind the kit and I'm like, where did I go? Where did all of that go? And it doesn't mean one's good and one's bad. It just means that both of them are true. And the practice is going to help you develop being okay with what's true right now. And if you get that sorted out in this 12 square foot laboratory, life becomes a lot easier. Because life is full of vicissitudes, okay? There's ups and downs, there's expansions and contractions, and we have to meet those. But if you can actually exercise the muscle with meeting it with okay, I can work with this, or hey, that's cool, I showed up, I investigated things, I'll let nature take its course. My job was to show up. If you get that piece right, you'll stay in this game forever. And again, that's priceless. And with that, this idea of showing up, let's talk a little bit about that. There is a certain amount of right effort that's required. I mean, no shots, no ducks. If you don't put the time in, nothing is going to happen. Okay, so what you want to do is find where that balance is. Now, I like to explain it like this. When you start the practice, you're actually entering into a dialogue with yourself, in particular your nervous system. Okay? And much like if I were to sit here and yell at you, how long would you listen to me? You'll be like, hey, talk to the hand. And the nervous system is like that. That if I demand of my body to do something too fast, then it's just going to stop. In fact, the very mechanisms that I'm after really respond well to compassion and patience. Okay? So again, there's a certain amount of attention and effort, but then there's also this, you want to wait for the body to volley. All right? And again, if you get that internal dialogue sorted out, anything's possible. You'll stay in this game a long time and without injury. Because it's generally when we ask too much of ourselves and sometimes too quickly, the body doesn't have a chance to respond and something negative can result. All right, all that said, I'm going to tell a little story now that I find really tempers our enthusiasm, or not so much the enthusiasm, but maybe helps cultivate patience for the practice. So this is a story about a mango tree, and oftentimes I tell this story in juvenile justice classes I teach there, and there's a lot of young boys that want to get good really fast. So they have this energy like a straw fire. It burns really brightly for a short period of time, and then it's out. And what we're looking for here is slow burn over the long haul for a lifetime. Okay, and that requires discipline and patience and all things considered. So let's talk about quickly a mango tree, because this really explains how this practice develops. So you have your mango seed, and you know that the nature of this seed is that in some time, with proper care, it's going to bear really great fruit, because you really dig mangoes. Right? So you plant it into the ground, you cover it up with some dirt, and now you have a pile of dirt. There's no evidence that the seed's doing anything. Yet you show up and you water it. Day after day, you're watering a pile of dirt. There's no evidence that anything's growing. Why are you showing up? Well, you have faith in the seed. Right? You've seen enough examples of seeds planted that if they're watered and cared for, they grow. And the yoga's no different. But the seed is. And the seed is you. All right? So when you start this practice, okay, You're the seed and the practice is the watering. Okay? And by showing up, you're giving that seed a chance to break out of its shell, which, by the way, in the shell, you can put the seed in the street and drive over it and nothing will happen. But once you open up to the practice, you got the hardest part of the growth process for the seedling. Okay? It's brand new, but it's got to push through dirt. Okay? And this is what the yoga practice is like. That at first, wow, you're coming up against, oh my God, my hamstrings are tight, or wow, it's hard to twist this way or that way, or this injury pops up, or this idea pops up, and 1,000 reasons why you shouldn't practice, or why this isn't good for you pop up, okay? And that's like pushing through the dirt, okay? So all this is happening under the ground without any evidence that anything's happening. But the process has started. And then after showing up and watering the seed, after some time, it pops through the dirt and you have your little seedling. And you're like, wow, cool, there's evidence. But you don't have mangoes yet. What you do have is a lot of work. Okay, now you have to protect it. Now you're a gardener. Okay, you need a little fence around it to keep animals from coming in. Relevant to the practice, this could be, maybe you want to go to bed early so you can get up and do your practice, but friends want to have you go out. And you're like, no, if I go out tonight, then I'm going to wake up and I'm not going to have a really good practice, or I might even, not even take my practice. So you want to, once this thing starts to grow and you get some evidence, you don't let go of it. Okay, you got a lot of care and feeding left until this thing is pretty standalone. And what you're looking at is that over time, it'll start to turn into the great oak tree or the great mango tree. You're not out there watering these things. Okay, they're standalone. They can sustain even in dry times. But what do? They bear their fruit. And the yoga practice is no different. Through continuity of practice, which is the watering, things are going to start to show up. And you might find some growth, and then there's a plateau. You might find some more growth and a plateau. But even during those plateaus, you need to keep some effort to keep things moving forward. Cool. There's the mango tree story. And it might take some time as well. Okay, there's no instant pudding with growing a mango tree. I guess the last concept I want to put out here is that kind of practicing with the seasons. Okay, as you get into this, and I really do hope for you to explore this over at least a year or a couple years, you're going to find that you have seasonal practices. Okay, we're no different than nature. We're made up of the same elements of the environment, and we have our winter practices and our spring and summer and fall practices. So you're going to find that whereas I spoke about a biofeedback loop in an earlier module, that who I am today shows up on my mat the next day, and I'll see some expansion and contraction and some cause and effect there, that if it's cold out and dry out, you might find that the practice is a little stiffer, maybe not as fluid. In the summertime, it's a great time to work on flexibility. Okay, you're going to also get a lot of heat energy up. The sweat is purifying in that regard. The winter practices, it's working on energy and strength and not pushing for flexibility per se. All right, so you're going to start to find that, again, your practice has seasons as well. And what I love about it is that it actually syncs you up with the rhythm of nature. So you're going to find that as you stay in this over time. All right, cool. I think I've covered pretty much what I'd like to in this module. We'll look forward to you in the next module. Namaste.